Hey everyone, Chuck Northcutt here, and I have another Northcutt family video for us. Except this one is a little unlike the previous one I made, whereas instead of old home videotapes, I actually have put together a history of our Northcutt family. If you're anything like myself, you've often wondered where we've all originally came from. You've wondered the stories of the people who came before us. If, like me, you've asked around and you probably came to a roadblock to John Northcutt, having our family history stop somewhere around the early 1900s, late 1800s. Now that's not counting the regular family history that we all can find online or in those old shopping mall kiosks that tells us our coat of arms and what our ancestors did in little old England so many years ago. And that's all well and good. However, what we really don't have is a link from those ancient stories to our more relevant and current family members and everything in between. We just don't have it, or at least I can never find it. So we've just always accepted that the last person in our link was John Northcutt. We've all heard the stories about how he came out of Texas and settled down in Sparta, Tennessee, White County, Tennessee, and started the family that we all came from. Myself, I came from Fred Northcutt. But the fact of the matter is, most of us just don't know who came before John. And we've really not had a way to know until now. Thanks to recent technologies, I've been able to do some family research using websites like Ancestry.com, FamilySearch.com, and a few others, and using techniques involving U.S. Census records, matching birthdays from those with birth records, marriage records, names, and things of that nature. And by using these techniques, I've been able to piece together a history of our family, starting with John Northcutt, who coincidentally came out of Kenton County, Kentucky, and took it all the way back to England, who, by the way, was another John Northcutt who came out of there and settled in Virginia. So I've been able to put all of this together using the techniques I mentioned. I feel pretty confident that this lineage is the one that we all came from. The following movie will show you that lineage. Now, of course, nothing is ever ironclad. If there's anything in here that you may dispute, of course, let me know. Also, if there's anything here that has led you to ask questions, I heavily encourage you to do your own research and see what else you might find. It's certainly how I got started in this, and I'm very happy with what I have found, as I hope you too will be. So, with no further ado, I present to you the history of our Northcutt family. Enjoy. Everything we know about our family starts and ends with the father of most of our great-grandparents, John Northcutt. According to the stories I've heard growing up, John Northcutt left Kentucky at a young age and moved to Texas, where he married and had 2 boys. When someone owed him money and refused to pay him back, he cut the tongue of the guy's horse and fled Texas for Oklahoma as a fugitive, since killing another man's horse was punishable by hanging. In Oklahoma, John Northcutt again started a family and got into trouble, so he went back to Tennessee, where he married again to Mattie Lou Higdon and started another family, living out the rest of his life, or so the stories go. This Tennessee family is the one from which we all come from. I'm sorry to say, though, that based on my research, John Northcutt was not the first Northcutt in Texas. He was not even the first John Northcutt in Texas, as there were several John Northcutts already in Texas around 1864 when John was just a baby. Who knows? Maybe the reason he went to Texas as a young man is because he already had extended family there that would help him get set up before he had to abruptly run from the law. Based on my research, I found that John Northcutt was originally from Kentucky as the son of a Jackson Northcutt. Putting John in Kentucky would make more sense, as this matches up with his birth year of 1864, putting him at that farm as a boy. Surprisingly, there were a lot of other John Northcutts running around at that time out of Tennessee, so it was difficult at first to pinpoint our John. But this John is the only one who matches with both of our John's date of birth and state of origin. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, by 1910, John is settled in White County, Tennessee, with his final family working in the lumber mills at the age of 46. Going on the assumption that Jackson, whose full name is Andrew Jackson Northcutt, I'll give you guys all one guess after whom he was named, being born in 1831 and all. But going on that assumption that he's our John's father, I was able to track his dad to a George F. Northcutt, that's F as in Frank, who was born in 1795. This, of course, takes our family back to being here in America around the Revolutionary War. Some conflicting info on Andrew Jackson attached in that he was registered for the U.S. draft during the Civil War, but there was an Andrew J. Northcutt who fought for the Confederacy during that same time. George's dad and Andrew Jackson Northcutt's grandfather was a Benjamin Northcutt, born in 1764, based on the diary of a William Brooks Northcutt, which I discovered through my research. William Brooks Northcutt is the older brother of George F. Northcutt. Again, that's John's grandfather. And he lived a very interesting life, of which he was compelled to write about in his later years, which included our family history, while not in our direct lineage as George's brother and the son of Benjamin Northcutt. William Brooks Northcutt can certainly be considered our indirect ancestor. Among his many interesting tales of living life in the American frontier in the early 1800s is that he fought off the British and the Indians in the War of 1812 throughout the great state of Ohio to help keep Ohio out of the hands of the British. For those of us Northcutts that's proud to be from Ohio, imagine that one of our ancestors fought to keep Ohio in the United States. Now, I just want to stop and think and reflect on that for a minute. For all of us Northcutts who proudly claim Ohio as our home, some of us have been here for a couple generations, just think about that for 1 second. There was a Northcutt fighting to keep Ohio in the Union, fighting against the British and the Indians to protect the great Buckeye State. Let's just savor that for one moment and know that our heritage to our great state runs deep. Also uncovered was an 1820 census record for a different George Northcutt and his family in Covington, Kentucky, which turns out to be in Kenton County, Kentucky, right across the Ohio River from Cincinnati, Ohio. These earlier Northcutts set up camp right next to Ohio. Notice at that time he owned 0 slaves, according to the records, and appears to be a small farmer. While not 100% certain, I believe this George to be the uncle of our George F. Northcutt and William Brooks Northcutt, of whom is mentioned in the diary of William Brooks. A combination of reading through the William Brooks Northcutt Diary and online records research takes our lineage all the way through Kentucky and Virginia back to England into the year of 1630, when yet another John Northcutt, of England this time, was born. William Brooks Northcutt tells the fascinating story of how his family, led by his father Benjamin Northcutt, made the journey on pack horse all the way over the Appalachian Mountains in the spring of 1797 from his hometown of Fauquier County, Virginia, to settle in the frontiers of Kentucky along the Ohio River when both he and George F. Northcutt were just little boys. Coincidentally, Benjamin Northcutt's father, Richard Northcutt, who was born in 1737 and is also the grandfather of William Brooks and George F. Northcutt, fought in the Revolutionary War. Unfortunately, Richard died on October 1st, 1781, at the age of 44, under the command of no other than then General George Washington, at the Battle of Yorktown, also called Little York, when General Charles Cornwallis surrendered the British troops to the Continental Army. This means that one of our direct ancestors gave his life for the birth of our nation. Richard Northcutt would be mine and my sister Ellie's great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, just to give you an example. To further help put things in perspective, for my sister's boys, my nephews, you would add a great to all of those greats I just listed off. And for our dad, you would take a great away. So using that same formula, feel free to figure out which great-grandfather of yours our brave Richard Northcutt is. While the William Brooks Northcutt Diary is a fun read that tells the story of our family's heritage, he actually missed a few generations in the fact that his and George F. Northcutt's great-grandfather John Northcutt was born in Virginia to a Thomas Northcutt, also born in Virginia. In fact, it would have been Thomas's father, John's grandfather, thus William Brooks and George's great-great-great-grandfather, John Northcutt. Man, they really loved this name back then. Born in 1630, who would have actually been from England. His father was a Henry Northcutt, for whom nothing more was found. There is also some conflicting information on the birth year and place of the original John Northcutt's son, Thomas. Some accounts have him born in the year 1644 in Devon, England, instead of 1650 in Norfolk, Virginia. This would make John a proud papa at the age of 14 instead of 20, which I'm sure was a lot more common back then. Further, adding the interesting twist of John taking his baby or toddler across the ocean with him to America in one of those historic tall sailing ships that took months to cross. Who knows which version is the right one? Either way, it is fitting that our family history that starts with a John Northcutt who traveled across the country ends with a John Northcutt who traveled across the Atlantic Ocean for the New World. Given that he was already in Virginia in 1650 when his son Thomas was born, John absolutely would have been one of the first permanent settlers in Virginia and North America. Guys, based on that, we Northcutts have been in America since the very beginning. Let that sink in.